that come to mind in terms of having to fight that. We're also going to give a lot of examples of this as we go along. The most common frivolous claims are delay claims and total cost and modified total cost claims. Now, the reasons why these are the most common is due to the fact that they are more arbitrary than say unforeseen conditions, etc. For a total cost claim to be valid, it has to meet 4 conditions. First, is the nature of the losses make it impossible or highly impracticable to determine them with a reasonable degree of accuracy. In other words, the contractor has to be able to demonstrate that there were so many different impacts that overlapped one another that there was really no way to track any individual one accurately. The contractor's bid or estimate was realistic. And the important thing here to keep in mind is the contractor is going to come back and say, well, you accepted the bid. So if you did, it's going to be kind of a hard one for you to say, well, your bid wasn't realistic, because if you didn't think it was, then there's a good chance you should have rejected it. Third, the contractor's actual costs were reasonable, and the contractor was not responsible for the added expense. Now, this is a tough one, because in terms of a total cost claim, for the contractor to be able to prove that he's not responsible for the added expense, essentially what you're saying is, or what the contractor's saying is, well, we didn't have any fault on this job. Well, how many times does that occur on any project? So that's one of the key things to keep in mind when you're hit with a total cost claim or modified total cost claim, because for them to be completely faultless is completely ridiculous in most cases. Now, the top causes of frivolous claims. Through my experience, I've determined that the most common causes of junk claims are due to the following. First, there's no daily job cost accounting in place. Now, I'll bet you that if you were to walk up to any project manager and ask them what their profit or loss margin was to date, at least 80% of them would tell you that they didn't know. Now, this just blows my mind, but it's true. Most of the contractors out there don't have a friggin' clue what their actual costs are on a daily basis, or even what the total job costs are to date. Now, as a result, they don't recognize changes that need to be made to increase their efficiency and lower the daily operating costs. The PMs often think that they're doing a great job and that the project has got to be making money, only to find out later in the project that they're upside down and they're over budget. This in turn causes the panic button to be pushed, and they realize too late that the only way to make up the losses now is by filing a claim. The next most common issue is they came in a lot lower. They left a lot on the table, and they have to try their hardest to make up the difference. Now, as is well known, unfortunately in this economy, contractors are having to slash their bid prices and bidding jobs at a tiny profit margin, no profit margin at all, or below what they can actually do the project for. Now, the reason why they would even bid a project at a loss is simply due to cash flow. They need a source of revenue to keep their doors open so they can bid the jobs below cost with the hope that they may be able to make up the losses either through change orders or claims or possibly on other projects. Personality conflicts is the next issue. Claims filed due to this are quite common because often the relationship between the contractor and the owner gets so nasty because of the egos and whatnot. The contractor seeks ways to file claims because he simply hates the owner's rep and wants to stick it to him. The other issue is the contractor is trying to hide from their own problems. There's a million different things that could cause the contractors to have problems of their own. This would be including not having enough resources, subcontractor problems, not having enough money to purchase required materials, or failure to secure materials on time, etc., etc. Now, this is one of the more common reasons for frivolous claims. because in a way that they need to do a diversion. There's oftentimes a lot of issues that you do not know about that the contractor hides and tries to mask through doing a claim or filing a delay claim and whatnot to try to cover up the problems which he has. I'm going to go into more detail on this as we go along. Another one is bonuses. Contractors often give bonuses to PMs for making money on the job. This is another common but not widely considered or recognized cause of claims. Again, a lot of this is due to the economy. We're all having to work harder for less money. Many of us are living in paycheck to paycheck and need additional money to get ahead. As a result, project bonuses are no longer a perk for many. They're actually a necessity. Therefore, the PMs look for every angle they can to make money. But when their bids are so low, oftentimes the only way they get a bonus is if they succeed in filing claims. As a result, they often, if there's not one that's legitimate, they'll find a way to file a claim anyway with the hopes of succeeding even with the frivolous or bogus claim. In evaluating merit, and I've learned that whenever faced with a claim, the first things I like to do are ask myself questions on certain issues. The first one is the timing. When was the claim filed? This can tell you a lot about the intent or merits of the claim, and we're going to go into more depth on this. Location. The area that is being claimed may have more premeditated intent than actual merit. Who's to blame? Now this may sound like a no-brainer, but what may appear as an owner-related issue may actually be the responsibility of the contractor. Again, I'm going to go into more on this as we go along. Concurrent delays. This is huge. This is one of the best and most accepted methods of countering bogus delay claims. As you will see as we go along, there's a bunch of different methods for showing concurrent delays that are not often considered. Now, the next one is, does the cost of the claim jump right out at you as being ridiculous? A junk claim is most likely one that is going to be large in size. Now, this is due to the issues already mentioned. The contractor's most likely not going to file a bogus claim unless there's enough money in it to make it worthwhile for the effort to seek it. Let's go into some more detail here. In regard to timing, like I said, the timing of the claim can often give you clues as to the validity of it. Was the claim filed at the beginning of the project? Oftentimes, if the contractor submits a claim early on in the job, it's because they recognized a potential problem prior to bid, and instead of asking a question about it during the pre-bid conference, they waited to spring it on the owner so they could bid low and recover the cost during construction. And this is where pre-bid requirements are vital in terms of your contract documents. We can go into that, and I've discussed it before. You definitely need to have language in there that makes it so, states that the questions and the timing of them must be asked during the pre-bid conference and that they are satisfied with the bid documents as being accurate. Now, if they file the claim at the end of the job, this is typically a red flag that tells you the contractor finally caught on that they're losing their butt, and now they're desperately trying to make up their losses. Random timing. Now, if the claim's not filed around the time of the alleged impacts when they occurred, it may likely be filed because the contractor has a vendetta against the owner. The contractor may get really ticked off over something said, personality conflict issues, etc. He may think, hey, to hell with them, I'm going to go after more money. And he most often, in that kind of a case, he's going to go after it in methods that do not have merit or validity to them. Prior to mobilizing to a certain area, if that contractor hasn't even mobilized to a certain area of the job and files a delay claim, you've got to look beyond you got to look a little deeper for the reasons as to why. And they allege there's oftentimes more reasons behind this. And I'll explain as we come up that a lot of times there's premeditation in this involved as well. Now, were RFIs sent well before? Now, more often than not, the contractor is not going to issue RFIs for work that isn't scheduled to start until later on down in the project, especially if it's not coming up in the next month or so. But if they do file it early, it may very well be for some other reason than they are just trying to be proactive and trying to limit any delays. They likely saw that there was a problem prior to bid and waited to hit with the owner when they should have asked for resolution prior to bid. In regard to location, again, this tells you a lot about the claim. First of all, I know this is a no-brainer. Is the area claimed on the critical path, but it's something I've got to bring up because obviously it's very vital. And were all submittals in place and approved? If not, the contractor may strive to find an owner-caused delay to hide or counter their failure to have all approvals in place. Was all equipment on site? Now, this is a little tougher question to answer than it may seem. The contractor may very well have some equipment there, but not all that is needed, especially specific pieces of equipment that are vital or critical to being able to complete the work. Problem here is you've got to be able to know the difference. You've got to be able to know what's missing. You know, obvious ones would be like a crane's not there or paver's not there. But look beyond that and see if they actually had the work that was necessary to perform it, if they actually had the equipment necessary to perform the work. Now, the contractor may not have the equipment on site because it's not available due to being on another project. Of course, he's not going to tell you that if he's not able to do it. He may file a claim, as it was stated, because of trying to mask or hide issues with his own resources. Now, if you can demonstrate that they weren't prepared to begin, you can definitely successfully counter their claim. Were all required materials on site or ready to be shipped? If the contractor has not asked for a stockpile payment, then they either aren't very good PMs or they don't have the materials. Now, oftentimes the owner doesn't know that the contractor was unable to secure the materials and negotiates a claim that didn't have merit to begin with. The contractor may say, when asked this, he may say, why would we ship the materials if we couldn't start? This is when you ask for written verification from the manufacturer that the materials have been stored and are ready to be shipped, or you physically verify that this is true or false. Was a subcontractor or subcontractors on site with all resources needed? Now, all the above that we've stated before applies to subcontractors as well. But subcontractor issues are huge and are often hidden. And I'm going to go into ways on how we find these as we go along. Often general contractors may not have the required subcontracts in place in time for them to get the on-site and doing the work. This is a lot more common than you'd think. A lot of times after the bid, there's disputes on trying to get the contract language or the contract agreed upon between the parties. The general contractor might try to get the price reduced, et cetera, so the contract doesn't get signed. They haggle about it, and as a result, they're not able to get the subcontractor on the site. So the subs aren't on site. You need to ask for a copy of the subcontract agreement. If they don't give it to you, well, that's a pretty good indication that they don't have it. And once again, that gives you the ammo to help fight a bogus claim. Now, I want to go into documents that are best to use in your defense. Documents for use in fighting claims. The golden rule here. The best documents to use as exhibits in fighting claims are the other party's documents. That's absolutely critical that you have great documentation yourself. However, there's nothing stronger than using the contractor's docs against them. We'll start off with the construction schedule. We're going to go the baseline through final here. Once again, the no-brainer. Was the issue claimed on the critical path? It's got to be stated. We're going to go into the next one. Did the critical path change just prior to the issue becoming a claim? Now, if so, you need to dig deeper to see if such a change was valid, or if it was due to previously recognized problems that the contractor is trying to take advantage of. This is one of a million reasons why schedules have to thoroughly be reviewed prior to approval to ensure that bogus changes that cannot be proven to be critical are not allowed to be on the critical path. Was a delay activity added to the schedule at the time of the occurrence? If not, this should be a red flag. If the contractor later on in the project comes back and files for a delay claim and for something that happened long before, it's critical that if there's any delay that occurs, the contractor needs to put it in the schedule immediately. It must show up on the next updated one. If it's not on there, then how is it actually impacting the project? How are they going to be able to come back later on and say, well, that delayed this, caused this lag, this change, changed our driving activities, etc., etc. They didn't put it in there then. It's going to be very difficult for them to come back later and try to make up a claim. If the contractor feels it's likely due to them trying to make up the losses. If he didn't put in there a delay activity, it's just like the other ones we talked about before. It's most likely because they found out later on they're losing their butts on the job, and now they're coming back to try to blame the contractor or the owner for some other issue. Now, what does the electronic version show? I tell you, this is where owners screw up over and over again. It's because they don't bother to look at the electronic version, or they don't have the software, or they don't know how to use the software. Yet it's absolutely critical that every schedule be reviewed using the software it was developed on. If you don't have the software, don't know how to use it, then make sure you contract with somebody who does. Now, why? Simply several reasons. A paper copy of the schedule only tells you a fraction of what you need to know. Using the software tells you if the critical path is legitimate or has been made by manipulating lag, float, predecessors, etc., etc. It also tells you if they actually made the relationship ties correctly, or, again, if they manually inputted the activities without the required ties to make the critical path the way that they wanted to have it. And now, a huge issue here that you need to keep in mind. Most of the contracts require that the contractor submit an electronic version. Now, by requiring the contract to submit an electronic version, the contractor can then include information in the form of logs, etc., that supports the position when the position may be bogus. But if you approve the schedule without comment, it can easily become a nightmare for you because they can claim that they notified you, you knew about it, you approved it, you didn't argue it, and now it can be argued that by not making a comment and allowing the information to stay, there's an implied approval of the information. Here's an example of a claim that I dealt with. I was contracted by a municipality to fight a contractor claim for delays and damages. The claim was submitted for around $3.2 million. Now, when I first saw this claim, I was nervous as heck because, man, this thing was put together well. It was professionally done, and it seemed to have valid points regarding the impacts to the critical path. And I started thinking, I'm not a person that loses, and I sure as heck didn't want to lose this one. And so I decided, after having gone through it, one of the last chances I had was I asked for the disc. They didn't provide that. And they didn't want to give it to me. It took them 2 months before they finally did. And once I got a chance to go through it, I found that their schedule, how they put their critical path together in their claim fragnets, was bogus. They didn't have any of the ties in there. They increased lag in areas to make it so the critical path would get pushed out. They increased all types of information. They made the relationship ties so ridiculous that there's no way in heck that that critical path was valid. As a result of being able to look at that disk and see that and itemizing those issues, a $3.2 million claim went down to $300,000, and that was pretty much just nuisance money to give them so they could avoid having to go to court and spend even more in litigation. Contractor daily reports. You know, I've said this before, as those of you who've attended before know, these are the most valuable documents when it comes to supporting a claim. This is because it provides the information from the eyewitness. As a result, you need to do the following. Demand copies of daily reports prior to making any considerable effort preparing your defense. Now, if the contractor refuses, you simply reject the claim due to the lack of supporting documentation. There's no way that you can possibly expect, nor would any arbitrator or judge back him if he didn't want to provide the daily reports. That's vital information that has to be given to be able to substantiate any argument. This is key. Demand subcontractor daily reports. Now, most claims include costs incurred by subcontractors. If they do, you're entitled to their daily reports as well, since you need their supporting documentation in order to make any related payment. The huge benefit in obtaining these reports is that they often provide information about the general contractor that you haven't seen, information that talks about GC-caused delays or issues between the general and the sub that caused project delays. Request diaries, but know that they may not have to produce them unless court ordered. Diaries fall into a little bit of a different category. You can ask for them, and if you get them, it's great, because diaries are, most people look at them as being diaries that are personal to them. So they write a bunch of stuff in there that they typically wouldn't want the owner to see, especially problems that they had internally and with their subcontractors. Now, you need to compare the reports to the issues claimed. I find that more often than not, contractor daily reports are either poorly written, and they don't include all the information regarding the labor, equipment, and issues that took place on site. And they don't cite all the delays and impacts that are being alleged. And they don't cite anything that would help back up the claim that's been filed. I'm going to give you an example here. Here's a daily report from that was provided after much delay trying to get a hold of it. But here's an example of the daily report that was given on a claim that was filed. Now, there's several things to catch on to here in terms of it being a little bit bogus. If you can see my arrow here on the equipment part, they say loader. They don't give the model, but it's loader 8 hours, scraper 8 hours, pickup, skip loader 8 hours, water truck, and a grader 8 hours. You come down here to the manpower. You got Mike, who's an operator. There's 8 hours. Danny, operator, 8 hours. Then you got a teamster, a laborer, a flagger, and another laborer. All right, how the heck does this work? You got 2 operators, and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of equipment that require an operator to be a licensed operator. So obviously the equipment in there is well overstated, and this is found throughout their documentation. They try to beef it up. Come down here on subcontractors, it just says very little other than the fact that where they were. A key thing here also in terms of not only finding that they were overstating their equipment hours is that they made a comment down here, scheduled to pave tomorrow, but RPC said they can't until next week due to lack of notice. Well, you've got 2 things here now. You've got proof that they were beefing up falsely their equipment time, and you've got a concurrent delay here because the schedule that they had on being to do paving can't be met, and it wasn't the fault of the owner. One of the most important things you can do and find in these documents is concurrent delays. Now, as I mentioned before, the dailies of the general contractor and the sub often contain information that shows contractor cost delays. Again, this is one of the strongest methods of countering a bogus claim. It's vital that when you go through and you're looking at the general contractor reports and subcontractor reports, a lot of times the subcontractor looks at their dailies as being a lot like people look at the diaries. Not something that they would have to forward to the owner because they just have a relationship or the contract with the general contractor. However, whenever they file a claim, they have to be able to back it up just as the GC does. And so now you get to get all this information, which is going to provide you an ungodly amount of detail in terms of being able to show concurrent delays. I'm going to give you an example of the situation. I was contracted by a municipality to fight a claim. They paid us a fortune to put, to research it, to go through all the data. We went through and finally, after months, got the subcontractor daily reports and the general contractor daily reports. And by going through there, we were able to go through and find comments made in each one of them for each day that the contractor was claiming as being delayed by the owner. This is a graph that was done to show that. You stay down here, the numbers here represent the document number, which mentioned the delay that was caused by either the general or the subcontractor. Unfortunately, in this situation, even though we went through an incredible effort to put this together, the municipality hired a law firm. The law firm ignored this. They saw that the contract language said no damage for delay, and they felt like that's all that was needed. They were going to focus on that and try to get the case dismissed. We went back and said, no, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You need to use the concurrent delay issues. They didn't use the issues. That was ignored, and the contractor was awarded almost $12 million. I mean, they gave him everything. Consultant time, attorney's fees, and they paid for the kibble for the guard dog. I mean, they got everything. If they had done this, the concurrent delays, they very well would have won and saved them an ungodly fortune. Now, bid documents. This is very, very, very critical, okay? Because again, the contractor always says, the claim of, well, it's different, our as-bid is completely different from as-built. Well, if they want to prove that point, they have to verify how they bid the project. They may claim that it's proprietary information. This is going to demanding contractors a bid breakdown of their bidding software. They may claim it's proprietary information, which to some degree is, but not to the owner when it comes to supporting claims. So long as the information is not shared with competitors, you have the right to it. They have to answer their as-bid versus as-built. They have to show you how they bid that job to be able to support their claim. You are entitled to this information. By evaluating the bid documents, you're likely to find that the as-bid scenario claimed is not actually how the project was bid. Compare the amount of labor hours when you get this, the types of trades and the amounts of equipment, etc., that they estimated to use. Again, you're going to find there's often a discrepancy there. This is information, everything in the documents in their bid that they had to have compiled in order to put their bid together. Without you providing such information, there is no way for you to verify the merits of the claim. Obtain subcontractors' bids. The same issues apply here. Everything that if they've got costs in the bid, then just like the general, you're entitled to how they put it together as well. Demand a copy of each subcontractor contract. You need to verify that the information that they're claiming is accurate. You need to be able to see what the pricing was. And one big thing here is that you need to keep in mind that when arguing an as-plan versus as-built damages, The contractor is not entitled to all the losses if it can be shown that the claimed issues were bid at a loss. In other words, let's say that the contractor bid to construct a bridge for a price of $2 million. The actual cost ended up being $3 million, and now the contractor is claiming for the difference. If it can be shown that the cheapest the contractor could have completed the work was for $2.5 million, then they're only entitled to argue for $500,000. You cannot recoup losses that you built into your bid. Other documents to use in your defense. Meeting minutes. Now, we've gone over this several times before in other webinars, but this is, again, very, very critical. If they didn't bring it up in the meetings, and they come back later on and they cite it, that they're trying to go after it, immediately that's a red flag, most likely a bogus issue. It's vital, though, that, again, as stated, that you have in your meeting minutes that a section to cover that, where you ask each week or whenever you hold your meetings, are there any claim issues or conflicts out there? If the contractor says no, then you're covered up to that point. Each week he does it, you're covered up to the, each additional week you're covered until he actually says something. If at the end of the job or later on he comes back and says, oh yeah, we've got a claim for something that happened 3 months ago, it's going to be really hard to fight it if you didn't bring it up before and you didn't give anybody the opportunity to mitigate the damages on that. Related correspondence. This is a no-brainer, just things that you need to be able to go through, go back through the letters, find any discrepancies, any notifications that were or were not given, because that's huge. If they didn't notify you again, then the claim is more difficult to argue. And your daily reports. I've got you daily reports, but your daily reports. Now that's critical, and like I said, you definitely need to have great documentation. Even though the contractor's reports and their docs are have the greatest strength if you're using it against them, you cannot rely on that. You've got to rely on yours backup. You've got to be able to have thorough documentation, and there's got to be somebody who's making sure that that takes place. So many times in dealing with municipalities, I've heard, oh, our daily reports they're so detailed, they've got all the information needed, it's going to be pretty straightforward when you go through there. And then I go through and there's not a damn thing on there. They're absolutely worthless. The reason being is because there wasn't anyone overseeing to make sure that the information that is required to be in those reports is actually in the reports. Contract language. Again, whenever you can, cite the contract in your defense, the clauses, and know the contract inside and out. And it kind of goes back to constructive bidder review, as I've said before. Make sure there's no conflicting language in there. Project photos. Photos are obviously huge. And again, if you've got a thorough photo log, like we mentioned in the last webinar, anything that you can show that is a photo to counter it is of great strength. And cost accounting documents. Now let's go into evaluating the cost of the claim. First of all, certified payroll. It's a no-brainer. But one of the key things that you can catch here is, again, overstating of equipment hours. Operator's hours, by verifying the operator hours in the certified payroll, you can often find they don't match what the contractor put down for the equipment usage. They have a frivolous cost there. You need to get the certified payrolls for all subs to verify the same. Job cost reports. Again, you can't verify the alleged damages without having the accounting support it. The job cost reports have got to be able to demonstrate or show the equipment costs, labor, materials, subcontractor costs, other, etc. If they cannot provide this, how are you going to be able to prove whether or not there's merit to it? Well, it's not your responsibility, it's their responsibility. They've got to be able to have a cost reporting system, an accounting system in place to be able to substantiate it. If they don't, you don't budge until they're able to do or provide something that can be verifiable. Now, the one thing that about the job cost reports, which is also key, is that you really need to have, when you ask for them, that they be provided with verification from the contractor CPA that the reports have been reviewed and they're accurate. I've seen so many ridiculous job cost reports that made no sense or blatantly inaccurate. I even had contractors tell me to show them where they need to beef up the costs to get more money. Just so you know, it's something I would never do. Well, first of all, it's illegal. And second of all, it only takes one stupid move to ruin your entire career. Paid invoices. Frivolous claims may include invoices as backup, but that doesn't mean that these invoices have been paid. It also doesn't mean that the invoices are legit. I've seen on numerous occasions where the contractor has had a subcontractor or vendor submit a bogus invoice to help beef up a claim. That's really not that uncommon, especially when it comes to frivolous claims. Their subcontractors are buddies, they're buddies with the vendors, they've known them for years, and they're all losing their tail end. So what do? They collude together, and they come up with this plan of submitting invoices. I've been dealing with lately, I deal with it, more frequently than you would imagine. So if you don't have a canceled check showing that the invoice has been paid, then it's something that really can't be considered. One thing when you're going through this and you're putting the cost together, you need to put some graphical analysis together. I think it helps support your claim. Here's an example of one from a claim that was, the contractor came in and said our as-bid versus actual costs were ridiculous. It's all the owner's fault. We didn't plan on spending these many hours on the job, and we're entitled to the difference. So we obtained all these records. We obtained the certified payroll. We obtained the contractor data reports, and we plotted it all out. Well, come to find out, he was full of it. The blue shows the as-bid, and the maroon purplish there shows the actual. In getting a hold of their bid documents, how they bid the project, we're able to easily counter their claim and show that no, your costs were actually lower than what they should have been because you didn't provide the necessary resources. Preparing your defense. This is vital. Now, how you present it is very critical, which may sound like an obvious statement, but I often see owners' rejection to claims that are not intimidating at all, to say the least. Let me give you an example. This is an excerpt from an actual letter that was sent in denial of a claim. Dear so-and-so, the government is in receipt of and has reviewed your claim for damages and additional delays as they relate to the alleged unforeseen conditions encountered during Phase 1. Please be advised that the government has found your claim to be baseless and without merit. As a result, your claim is hereby denied in its entirety. Well, that doesn't really do much of anything. It just ticked them off and made them more mad. It doesn't make them feel like they need to go back and question anything. All you've done now is just made it so they want to fight harder, go to the next level, and they don't have any, you have not increased the doubt in them in any way. When you put a defense together, you need to make it professional. You need to make it thorough. You need to isolate each point of the contractor's argument. Now, this is vital. You need to take each point, highlight it, and address it each point individually. You need to quote each point verbatim. Okay? You put that down, and then you can come back and highlight the key verbiage that's in there and respond to and counter each point individually. Use exhibits to substantiate your defense against each point. Okay, this is vital. You've got to be able to show, make it look professional. Use the documents against them. Every exhibit that you can include, which is, strongly related to it, is something that you need to have in there. Provide a summary conclusion. Now, how I recommend putting this together, it's kind of hard to give a visual here on the screen. But what I believe is that you've got to put a binder together. Put the tabs in there. Point number one, argument number one is tab 1. Okay, and then all the documents supporting your counter-argument is 1A, 1B, 1C. Put it together professionally. That way it makes it look, when you give it to the contractor, they're going to be like, holy crap. All right, they've done their homework, they've gone through, they may have caught on to us. They're going to start questioning themselves a heck of a lot more and maybe wanting to either come to the table, possibly even drop the claim. All right, if they don't, if you've got something stronger than what they provided, it puts you in one heck of a position to be able to go after them. All right, we finished up just a tad early, but there's some other things I want to address before we close up. First of all, keep in mind on the frivolous claims when they go through, there are different types of frivolous claims. You've got one that's just completely bogus, and you've got claims that may have some merit to them, but the costs are just outrageous. Differentiate the two. Just like the other one, the example I showed you, the $3.2 million versus the $300,000, there may be an ounce of validity to it, so it was worth going after it. But again, I see so many times in going after the defense that the people are not taking the effort to get the documentation, or may not even know that they have the right to all the documentation, such as the bid documentation from the software, the subcontractor reports. All this data or information that you must have enabled to make a sound decision on what you're doing. If you don't, then there's no way that they can possibly come back and expect you to be able to handle it. I'm looking at some questions here. From Douglas, it says, who should be responsible for preparing meeting minutes? In my opinion, it should always be the owner. Reason being is because you're going to have more control over it. You want to make sure that you have the information the way that you want it to be dictated. That doesn't mean that you want to be completely biased in what you're doing, but it's just better for the owner to put the meeting minutes together. There's often, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the questions is, should we also record the meeting minutes? Now, if I'm a contractor, I love to have those meetings recorded, because there's always something that's said by the owner. Somebody says something stupid, and they get to go back and ask for the recording. So, in answering that, yes, the owner should be the one that does it. If you're a contractor, fight like hell to be able to get it recorded. If you're an owner, stay away from it. Don't do it. Now, if there's any other questions you guys have, please feel free to ask them on the survey. And though we don't have time right now to go over all of them, I will address them directly with you, either by email or however you would like. But please feel free to ask any question you have. Also, it would be greatly appreciated if you take some time right now to fill out the survey. The reason being is we're trying hard to make these as beneficial to you as possible, and the feedback that we get from you is critical. So if you would please go through and just take a couple of seconds and fill that out, it would be fantastic. We're going to have a part 2 on this. It'll be coming up, and we're going to go into more detail on some other issues. So look forward to seeing you there. Definitely appreciate you guys attending this, and I hope that it was worthwhile. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you registered on the next one and answering your questions. Thanks, guys.